Welcome to the show with me, Dan, and my guest back again, Dan Aki. How's it going?
It's going good. How about you?
Yes, good. I'm excited. We after the last show, we left it on a bit of a cliffhanger. So I'm excited to actually get into what we'd been building up to in the last episode.
Same, yeah. Get
Yeah.
into a bit more detail.
That's it. Anyone who didn't listen to the last episode with Dan, so his name is Dan Aki, AKI, and I would advise listening to that first. But basically, what we're going into now is a trip where he basically endeavoured to run around the world. I think listening to a bit of the backstory of it would be really useful for anyone. So go back and find the first episode I did with Dan Aki to get a bit of context. But yeah, so in short, you were working in the banking sector. You had sort of a change of heart through someone in particular, sort of a turning point in your life into more self development and spirituality. And progressing yourself, I guess, mentally and as a human. And then there were a few more steps and a few more things that happened, and then you decided to run around the world. So yeah, I guess we'll just start from maybe just before you left. I think we covered a little bit. You said last time you didn't really plan that much, like leading up to it, like the weeks leading up to it. You said it was like 6 months or something that you had before, or like a planning stages or whatever. But like the weeks leading up to it, how were you feeling? What were your sort of ideas, and what were your plans? Where were you going to start and head towards?
So my feelings before, I was just, it was kind of just excitement at that point. I was working up until 3 weeks before I set off. So once at the end of August, I moved back home, spent a lot of time with my family, saying my goodbyes because I originally intended to be gone for a year on
Okay.
this trip. That
Wow.
was in the plan. So I said my goodbyes to everyone, and the intended plan that I had was to fly to France, and from Paris, I'd then run to Istanbul,
Okay.
which was my first kind of leg of this journey. So I had this intention of having four kind of distinct parts of this trip. The
Mm.
first would be running across Europe. Then I had a flight booked from Istanbul to India, and that would be my second part. And then I didn't have any real plans after that, but I just knew I'd continue. Um, so in the lead up to it, it kind of just felt like that. I just want to get this done. I've been thinking, and it's been occupying my mind for the last. I was planning it for 6 months, but probably more like 2 months. I was actually like really thinking, okay, this is happening. This is
Mm.
real. I guess once I started telling my family, and I'd handed my notice in at work, that was kind of like, right, I am doing this
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
It's not just an idea. Uh, but that preparation, as I said, it wasn't much for planning. Like I wanted to be fit, but I was actually quite injured all the time, so that didn't help. So there was a bit of anxiety there that like, would I be able to even do this without significant injury because my foot was a bit dodgy. It was actually even dodgy on the day I was flying.
Okay.
Like the day I got there, I was still pretty. If through to France, my foot wasn't 100%. It
Oh
was
wow.
bandaged up.
So was
But
that
that's
a
it.
little bit? You said last time you didn't really have many worries, but was that a little bit of a worry that that might get worse, or it might impinge on your trip?
Certainly. I remember a lot of the common questions when before I set off was, "What happens if you get injured?" And I'd always just say, "If I do, I do. I might
Mm.
have to come back." but if not, I'll just carry on.
Mm.
And that was the mentality that I had. Like, it was, if a challenge comes in my way, I'll face it as it comes. Not obviously make some preparations for some bad, not worst case scenarios, but if things were to go wrong, I wanted to be prepared. But I didn't want to be overly prepared. I wanted to be able to tackle the problems as they came. But one thing that really helped, so while I didn't do any real formal preparation, I maintained, I did a lot of running. I did this thing where I was running 1 kilometer on a day, then 2 kilometers the next day, 3 kilometers the next day. And I did that up until something like 25 kilometers. So I was running like a half marathon every day before work, which it got a bit silly. But that was just part of the routine. And at that point, actually, I was living in hostels in London because I decided to leave my permanent residence in the idea of training myself to live out of a backpack. So I just booked into hostels for about 9 weeks before I set off. So I was just living in shared accommodation, all my possessions in this backpack, and got used to that. There was a few nightmares with some of the accommodations that I stayed in. They weren't the best, but I certainly got used to it and adapted to it.
Nice. So just a couple of sort of practical questions. So like, were you, what did you have any rules that you set yourself? Like in terms of like, did you have to be running all the time? When you're going from place to place, or did you allow yourself to walk, or like did you have any sort of rules to yourself around that sort of thing?
Oh, I certainly walked a lot of it, if not most of it, but there was no real. Once I was out there, it was just like, okay, let's just take each day as it comes.
Right.
And that was the mentality that I had from a lot of mentors. I reached out to a lot of people saying, what advice can I you give me? And it was just take each day as it comes. Everything's impermanent. And that's something I learned. So one thing I do want to talk about was I went on a Vipassana retreat before I went on this trip. I think it was um, 2 weeks, no, a week before I set off. And what a Vipassana retreat is, it's a 10-day silent meditation retreat in which you don't look at anyone, so no eye contact, no verbal communication, and you're meditating for 10 hours a day.
Wow.
It's quite a regimented process. You wake up at 4 a.m. to the sound of a gong. You go to a meditation hall and you sit there for 10 hours in the day. You do get up and move between meditation sessions, which are typically an hour and a half or an hour.
Yeah.
But it is just that. So you're not allowed to bring any pens and paper in, no phones or anything like that. So you're sat with your mind for 10 days straight with no one to talk to.
Wow.
And that was quite an incredible experience. It was certainly the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Even after the trip, like the actual running itself, I think still that was the hardest thing because I don't know, it's just having to deal with yourself, really. There's no escaping. When your mind goes into all kinds of crazy places when there's no outside external influence on it.
So why did you decide to do it in the first place?
So listening to guests on Joe Rogan, a lot of people have been on these who've done wacky feats in their life. Like there's a guy called Colin O'Brady who walked across the Antarctica, and he often says that the most the most valuable part of his training was these Vipassana retreats, because it's all well and good physically training, but you need to be able to overcome adversity. And like I knew on this trip there's going to be so many times where I'm feeling down, and it's all about yeah, I'm gonna feel down, but I've just got to just carry on, and it's always better on the other side.
Mm.
And that's kind of what these trips teach. This is what the Vipassana kind of taught me. And one thing, I went into this I went into this retreat, knowing I wanted to go out there and run, but when I came out the other side, I was like so sure I was on the right path and I've made the right decisions in my life. Like, I didn't want to be in the office role, and that was really, really warming to
Mm.
just know that I was making the right decisions. Um, and I was also going in with the thoughts that maybe I'll go in and just think, you know what, I'm not on the right path. What am I doing?
Mm.
And that was a worry,
Mm.
because I'd already left my job, and uh, I might have been in a bit of a pickle after that, but
So
it didn't happen that
what
way.
was
So
difficult about it then? Because obviously on the face of it, it looks like the easiest thing ever, just to sit around, and just for a long time and just do nothing basically. And
so
so why was it the most difficult thing you've ever done?
okay, so let's, on a practical level, let's say anyone listening to this, try and sit still, cross-legged for an hour.
Mm.
And what you'll find is your legs will feel like they are on fire at the
Mm.
end of it. No matter how comfortable you are at the start, you burn at the end of it. And it's a weird sensation, because you're in pain, you're in quite agonizing pain, but you're not really doing any damage to your body.
Mm.
So, like, you can be sitting there in the most agonizing pain, and then the teacher will start chanting, and it's time to end, and you can move. You move your feet, the pain goes instantly.
Right.
You're a bit numb, but the pain just stops. And what one of the key teachings of this practice is about impermanence. Pain is impermanent, pleasure is impermanent.
Mm.
It's all about just observing it in the moment, and you can feel the pain 1 second, and then next minute it's completely gone. And that's interesting. Like,
Mm.
that certainly plays on your mind, because it makes you think that a lot of pain, and, well, in the context of the teaching, they call it suffering. Pain, pain is mandatory, or pain is non-negotiable. Suffering is voluntary.
Right.
So it's how you interpret the pain is is a is how why people suffer is what the teaching is. It's quite a Buddhist philosophy,
And
and
that could be associated. That could be like physical pain, um, that's come from a very obviously physical cause, and I guess there's emotional pain that's the same with that as well. So sort of the
exactly.
pain that comes from depression or loneliness or sadness, anger. That the when you what you're saying is even this something like anger, or having a dart in your knee, um, the pain itself you're gonna have in your life, and you can't get away from that. But well, hopefully you don't get a dart in your knee throughout your life, but you're gonna have some sort of physical pain. Whatever the pain is, you gotta. That is what it is, but it's how you react to that pain. I guess it sort of ties back to what we were talking about in the last episode
Certainly.
of these things will happen. It's sort of taking ownership of how you react to it, I guess.
And
Mm.
I knew that these times while I was out running, so
Mm.
uh, that I thought that would be a valuable thing to do, and I did that. And then a week later, I was flying to France. So
Right.
um, yeah,
Do you mind?
that's where.
Sorry if we're going to go off on a tangent with it, and I really do want to get to the trip itself. But I think this whole Vipassana retreat and this meditation thing is really interesting,
Okay.
because again, it's something that I think people would be like, well, what is the point of that? And I've heard people before asking me, like, because I've done meditation over the years, and I'm a believer in different forms. But what is the point of doing that? Why, what, can't you just like try and do better in your life, or just like how does meditation help? How will that retreat help you in a huge way, and what aspects?
So there's many practical reasons why I went on this,
Mm.
and one thing is you can try and improve yourself by just normally meditating, doing your, I don't know, your 10-minute mindfulness practice every day, and I'll certainly recommend that to anyone.
Mm.
But it's very hard to disconnect from the world.
Mm.
And we always have some form of influence controlling us, whether we know it or not. And by going to these retreats, but bearing in mind they're completely free of charge, that it's all run by volunteers and it's all charity funded.
Oh wow.
So you go into this, it's a very pure experience in the sense that you're not tied to it monetarily.
Mm.
You're there just to do the practice, and
Mm.
your food's provided. You don't have to worry about anything. There's nothing in your life apart from focusing on your breath.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you can do that for a day. You could do that for 2 days, 3 days, but it takes a while to kind of unwind your mind and unwind your body
Mm.
to even get into the phase where you can start actually looking deeply inside yourself. And
Right.
that might sound very, I don't know, woo woo, but it's like I do believe that to be true. Um,
So what
you
sort
need
of
a
stuff
few.
do you find? Like you don't have to say specifically what you found, but what sort of stuff do you find beyond those few days, beyond the sort of just meditation, or even people who don't meditate? Like what is that deeper understanding of yourself, or is it beyond words? I don't know.
It is beyond words, but I'll try and describe some of it. So it's obviously frustration. Um, when you sat there for so long, say you're after your 3 days, your first 3 days, you're actually only supposed to focus on the the part of your face above your lip and below your nose. So where my mustache is. um, and you for 3 days straight, you are just focusing on this tiny little part of your body, and that's all you're supposed to be focusing on. And you can imagine it becomes very frustrating. Like, what is the point in this? Why am I doing this? And that's interesting in itself to observe. Why are
Mm.
you getting angry at just doing this? When on the surface level, like what you just said, it is the most simplest existence you could imagine.
Yeah.
Your food's provided for you, your accommodation's provided for you, and all you're being asked to do is sit there and observe your breath.
Mm.
That to to anyone really, that is probably the easiest existence to do. But your mind tricks you and thinks, no, I want to be doing this, I want to be doing that. And especially with me, with the trip coming up, I was thinking and planning and just thinking everything, everything under the sun, even things that I wouldn't normally think of.
Mm.
And what it teaches you is that you often borrow happiness from the future or the past, but what we tend to, at least I do, and I think other people do this, we'll think about things in the future that are going to make us happy,
Mm.
rather than being happy in the moment when, if we are happy. A lot of people will go through happiness and not even realize they're experiencing it at the time because
Mm.
it's always it's always referential to a point in the future or the past. Like, it's often described like when you're eating a good meal, it's like you're not just enjoying the meal, you're thinking, oh, I can have this again in the future. It's like, no, just enjoy it right at the time.
Yeah, my partner, we had fajitas yesterday, and she said
Yeah,
we were with fajitas, like you want like a few of them, like I would say at least three,
yeah,
um, And she said, actually, because I was commenting on the sort of how fajitas, the last bite is one that you can't really control in the same way like other food. Like, the last bite of a normal meal, you can try and manipulate it so that the last bite you have is like the best. I was saying like
Yeah.
how with the fajita you can't really do that because it's all just mushed in together. And she said, I will get to how this is tied in. She said, with fajitas, actually, you always find that the first one, actually, if you think about it, is the best because everything's hot and it's ready to go and it's fresher. Um, but we're
Mm.
so focused on when we're eating a fajita, it's like focused on the next one and then the next
Yeah.
one that
And the next
we
one.
don't actually realize how good the first one is. And yeah, so that's just a sort of little thing that ties in with what you're saying. And I think the
Yeah.
same. I drew the analogy when she said that. I was like, yeah, similar with drinking, because I don't really drink anymore. I'm pretty much teetotal and have been for a while, but I have like the occasional just to taste or whatever. But yeah, with drinking, I found when I gave up drinking a few years ago and just tried it out for Lent in like 2012, I think it was. I realized there was this thing inside me that when you have one drink, you can be on such a good level, well, after having like a pint or two or whatever, but then your brain goes, well, I'm happy now, so I must be happier if I have another drink. And then you have that drink, and then
Yeah.
I'll be happier if I have another. And you just go and go and go, and then you just puking on the floor and or whatever else. But yeah, so that's just sort of a sort of everyday sort of tie in with what you're saying of like not appreciating the momentary happiness.
Exactly. And
Mm.
the same happens with the past. Like we sit in the sadness of the past as well. Like if something bad happened in our lives, or we often use that as it kind of anchors us in a sadness that we struggle to shake unless you really go deep in yourself and
Mm.
realize, okay, why is this causing sadness?
Mm.
And that when you sit with yourself for that long, you learn a lot more about them things, stuff that you don't even really think about. Like a lot of I've had some sad times in my life, and I rarely think about them.
Mm.
But then during that time, I really went deep in them, and it is interesting to see. What's the best way of describing this? To see how my point of view has changed on them times,
Mm.
um, from when I experienced them, and
Mm.
whether that how when I experienced them was even true, because like as I mentioned last time, we often nostalgia is plagued by this kind of just biased opinion on how
Mm.
the experience was at the time.
Mm.
And does that experience at the time even matter anymore? I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Mm.
It's your relationship to that experience right now is the only thing that matters really.
Mm.
It's about whether are you at peace with that time now. And it certainly allowed me to make peace with a lot of my past,
Mm.
which was nice. It freed me, it liberated me from the kind of shackles of my past, that I could just, okay, here's the next chapter beginning, and I
Mm.
can just go on this.
Yeah, that's great. So it's yeah, so it. I guess it's living more in the moment, isn't it? And
That
not being
that's
ruled
it.
by the past and the future. Yeah. Well, there's so much more I'd love to get into, but I am conscious that yeah, I think we should go into the trip and maybe leave the meditation and that stuff for another time. So yeah,
Certainly.
we'll put that on the back burner for now. I think yeah, it's fascinating, and I think yeah, it's amazing that you did this retreat. And so it's called the Vipassana retreat. It's free. Where did you do it? Just so people can look it up if they want to do it.
I did it in Suffolk.
Okay.
So if you yeah, if you just search for Vipassana meditation, there's centres all over the world. There's two in the UK, and UK, two in England.
Cool.
and yeah, they're free to sign up for. I think they're quite oversubscribed. There won't be it going on at the moment, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, just take a look.
Cool.
I'd recommend everyone do one in their life, just to. It's a challenge. It's a real challenge, but yeah, it's a worthwhile challenge.
Yeah, I think people like me definitely need to do it because I talk too much. So I think, yeah, I would love to do it at some point. But yeah, so okay, let's go back into the story. So you land in. So you've gone on the plane. Your feet are playing up a little bit, or you feel a bit worried about that. But you land in. Was it Paris?
Paris, yeah.
And then let's go from there then.
So I land in Paris in the evening, and I get a bus to where I'll be staying for the first night. Some place called Damartinengo. Stayed at an Airbnb, and I kind of got the. I would have walked or run, but it was getting late, and it was, yeah. I didn't want to throw myself right in the deep end like that. So I got to this Airbnb, rested for the night, kind of give myself a bit of a pep talk, like, okay, we're here. This is all a reality, and tomorrow is just gonna have to be what it is. And I woke up quite early, set off with my backpack, which was a lot heavier than I guess I anticipated. I'd done a bit of running with it before to kind of practice, but it was quite heavy. I think it may not sound heavy, but I think it was about 15 kilos at that point.
Right.
So, and this may sound silly, but I was using an app called Maps.me, which is a really great navigation app, and I just typed in Istanbul, and I followed it. It's as simple as that. So I had camping gear, so I was intending to sleep in what's called a bivouac, a little bivy bag, which is like a sleeping bag for your sleeping bag that's waterproof.
Right.
And I didn't have any idea on how much distance I wanted to do on this first day, but I just set off and thought, right, here we are, and just walked. And that first day was such a relief because I anticipated I'd be doing a lot of walking on main roads, and because I just thought that would probably be the most direct way in a lot of these built up areas. But almost immediately it was taking me down country lanes, footpaths, through woods, and I didn't realize how detailed this navigation app was, that it actually take me through these areas. But already I was going through like these picturesque woods, and I just was thinking, wow, I'm in for a treat. This is going to be amazing, some of the places I'm going to see. And I just walked. And that first day, I think I did something like 30 kilometers. So, yeah, I think about 30 kilometers. And I set up my bivvy, and I got caught in a storm.
Oh,
And it
really?
was,
First night.
yeah, first night. Well, actually, I anticipated the storm coming, and as I was setting up my bivvy, it started pouring down like torrential downpour.
Were you
Um,
sheltered at all? Were you in the woods or?
I was on some small little footpath under some trees. Um, it's quite scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, uh, I was kind of saying to myself, like, this is someone sending you a challenge. You're like, it's a first night, you're here, and it's going to be tough. Like, it's all well and good you planning this and visualizing it for the last few months, but you're here, and this is the real challenge. You've got to deal with it now. And I got into my bivy bag, and yeah, just sat there and tried to sleep got absolutely no sleep really, and got up in the morning and the weather had turned back to just a mild day, and again I started walking,
Wow.
and yeah, and that was the day to day. That was the second day was even stranger, because it's like, okay, I've done that. Your feet get a bit worn out from walking for 30 kilometers with a
Mm.
backpack on, and it's just like, okay, now today is just going to be an exact repeat of yesterday, just with different scenery.
Mm.
And despite it being different scenery, it all does blend into one. The fact that you're just going through a small little quaint French village, then into the country, then into the hills, and just over and over.
Mm.
And
So what were
I
you?
guess
Sorry, carry
uh,
on.
no. So,
What were you doing about money and food?
money and food. Okay, so money, I had saved up enough money for my anticipated year out.
Mm.
So I'd saved through my job, and some savings just generally from my past, that I'd felt like I could subsist for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And food, at this point, I was eating a vegan diet,
Mm-hmm.
which I no longer subscribe to, and I don't think it's healthy.
Mm.
Um, but I was eating a vegan diet, so I was eating a lot of what's called trail mix, just nuts, seeds, and fruit, like dried fruit. And I just had a big bag of it in my bag, ready to eat just when I needed fuel, really,
Mm.
because it's very calorie dense. So I was just snacking on that, and I was actually, it wasn't it wasn't until day 5 that I ate my first hot meal. I was just literally living off this trail mix for five
Really? So what?
days.
Even in the evenings, like you would just eat nuts and seeds and fruit.
Yeah, because I had
Wow.
no access to any facilities. I didn't have any kind of fat stove or anything.
Oh, okay.
Um, I just anticipated buying food along the way and eating it like that. And if there was like a restaurant or I don't know, a cafe that I went past and I fancied something hot, I could do that.
Mm.
But what I actually quickly realised was I wasn't going to encounter a lot of these places from where I was walking.
Right.
There was, I was kind of in the middle of nowhere a lot of the time, so there wasn't these cafes. Like in these small French villages, there wasn't. Um, there was typically a bakery and a florist, and that was it. And I mean, a bakery was all right because I could get some bread or something, but man cannot live off bread alone. So it's I just kind of was living off trail mix for that
Wow.
time. And I guess the next logical part to tie this little journey up was that I was doing this day in and day out for the first 5 days, walking for about 30 to 40 kilometers and then setting up my bivvy. And I was just getting absolutely no sleep. So there
Mm.
was, through the night, I was hearing all animals kind of howling and screeching and stuff. It was very unpleasant. There was
Mm.
insects all over the place, which wasn't too bad, but it felt very unsafe. I was
Mm.
in the middle of nowhere, with sometimes the nearest civilization was like, I don't know, an hour walk away.
Mm.
So, and there was a lot of nights of torrential downpour. So I was thinking, what happens if my baby leaks? I'd be soaking wet, I'd be shivering, and I
Mm.
wouldn't know where I was. So at that point, I kind of thought, like, I'm going to start getting accommodation.
Right.
I'm gonna stay in Airbnbs, hostels, whatever the cheapest option I could really do that was kind of en route.
Mm.
Um, and I never looked back from that point really, because up until then I wasn't getting any sleep, and it just, no sleep combined with then walking or running for such long periods of time, you you just drain yourself. I was
Mm.
so drained, And I will say that up until this point, I was basically just walking because I think the bag was too heavy. I couldn't really muster up the energy to get out and run. I mean, I did the odd like 30-minute stint of running, but nothing kind of continuous.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so I posted some of my camping equipment back and some stuff that I had packed that obviously I didn't realize I didn't actually need. So I was kind of always adapting and trying to lighten my pack just so I could then run much further. Because what I began realizing was I was telling myself I didn't. I've called this trip Dan Goes Running.
Mm.
I haven't called it Dan Goes Walking. I'm not enjoying this. Like, why am I'm on a hiking trip basically,
Yeah.
and the few moments where I got out and sprinted and ran, and I was just thinking, yeah, this is why I'm out here. I feel so good when I was doing that,
Mm.
and so I really wanted to get that back. So I wanted to lighten my pack as much as possible,
Right.
but obviously that means making some concessions with what I was carrying. Um, so I eventually basically got my pack down to just a raincoat, some changes of clothes, and then the disposable food that I needed that day. And that was my pack. So I did get it down to a point where I could run quite a lot really,
Nice.
and enjoy
So
myself.
the first phase was pretty much, even though it had been billed as Dan Goes Running, it was Dan Goes Walking, and
Yeah,
you were camping, and yeah, you had a lot on your back, and then you sort of made this change. So then you was like lighter, and you were you just purely staying in hostels and actual proper accommodation after that type thing.
yeah. So what I'd do was my typical planning would be I would look on the various booking sites and all that kind of thing to see what's available at a relatively cheap price
Mm.
in the direction that I'm going,
Mm.
and that's how I that determined my mileage for the day really, because some of these areas I was going through was so remote, there was sometimes I wouldn't encounter anywhere for 20 miles, 30
Mm.
miles. So I'd book into that place and say, okay, that's my target for the day. That's where I'm heading.
So your
And
phone
that,
was very important tool then.
oh yeah, 100%. Like I would not have done, yeah, it was, I hats off to anyone that like would do this without any kind of real navigation and was trying to do it all themselves with maps and stuff, because I certainly wasn't trained to do that, and
Mm.
I wouldn't have been able. It was a lifeline really.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, it's I guess
it
when
was
you hear stories from people like in their 40s, 50s or whatever, then that's sort of, yeah, it's another level, isn't it, of people who do that
yeah, exactly.
because they didn't have
I
smartphones and things.
Everything was a phone call where like if I was in that much trouble, I could always call my family home or
Mm.
whatever.
Yeah.
I never did, but it was yeah, it's nice to know that you're still connected to people you know back home and everything.
Yeah. So what
One
was
thing I will
sorry.
actually say about going through these French villages was I don't speak much French. I speak very little of it.
Yeah.
But and the language barrier was quite intense
That's what I
because
was going
these
to ask.
areas
Yeah.
wasn't cities. They they the communication wasn't very good,
Mm.
and that will highlight the first and quite lasting problem from my trip out
Mm.
was loneliness. I I had anticipated and visualized in my trip like meeting people along the way,
Mm.
but that wasn't happening. I was going from point to point. Even if I did meet someone, it was for we'd talk for a maximum of an hour, and that was it, and then I'm moving on. And
Yeah.
it was very broken English, so I wasn't forming any lasting relationships. I was just going out there and moving from point to point as a bit of a nomad,
Mm.
um, which yeah was tough.
Yeah. So how did you get around the language thing? Did you use your phone for that as well, or?
I didn't really use my phone for it. I mean, you can always use physicality to kind of communicate with people. I find like you can always find a way.
Yeah.
It was never. I was never in a real dilemma where no one could speak English and there was no way of communicating to each other. Like I always got the message across. Like if I needed water or something, uh, I could kind of symbolize that to people pretty easily and get
Mm.
some water off. Like it wasn't. But I guess what it did mean was that I was a bit more reluctant to interact with people because I knew there wouldn't be a good conversation there,
Right.
um, and I didn't want to trouble people because it may be a stereotype, but from what I gathered was, and from speaking to some people as well, is that the French people who don't speak very good English don't like talking in English. Uh, from what I've heard it described, is as they feel almost embarrassed that they can't speak good English, so they try to avoid it as much as possible.
Right.
And what that it made me feel like a bit of an outsider.
Mm.
Um, so that was certainly a trouble. And I was thinking all the way through France, which was 15 days from Paris until I reached the German border. I was kind of using the exact mentality that I shouldn't have, and I was borrowing happiness from the future, saying to myself, "Oh, Germany will be better. Germany will be better because people can speak better English."
Mm.
That was my personal experience, and that was the case. That actually was the case. That when I was in Germany, everyone seemed a lot friendlier and more willing to speak to me, and I met some great people
Mm.
there. But that was, yeah, as I say, yeah, boring happiness. Um,
Mm.
there was an interesting point when I crossed into Germany. I decided that I was going to do this. I thought it was okay. This is a kind of milestone in the journey. I've crossed through my first country, and a big country at that, France. Like I'd covered, I don't know, something like 500 kilometers in the space of 15 days, which may not seem quick, but it certainly felt good. And I got to the border, and I thought, right, how can I push myself now? And I decided to run as well, all the way through the night.
Oh, okay. What,
So
across the
I thought
border?
across the border, yeah. So I
Mm.
was like, right, I'm going to book accommodation that is, what was it, 100 kilometers away.
Mm.
I think, yeah, about 100 kilometers away. And I thought, right, I can do this in 48 hours quite easily. Um, little did I know it would not be easy. I was a lot slower to actually. I basically took my time when I was crossing over the river. I forget the name of the river that's on the border. Wern? I, I don't know. It's
I'm not sure.
beautiful anyway.
Did you have a head
But
torch or something on?
I had a head torch, yeah, so
Yeah.
I did have that packed. Um, and I took my time crossing. It was still daytime, and then I called home to my family to tell them. So I will say, I did call home to my family to kind of just tell them where I was and stuff, and I was
Mm.
updating them with just where I was each night, for safety reasons.
Mm.
And it was not nice to tell them, okay, I'm in Germany now. I've done my first milestone, and then say, yeah, I'm going through the night as well.
Mm.
And that night was horrific. Like I think at maybe midnight, like I was still okay. I'd talked to a few people. I was jacked up on caffeine, um, and I think I was only something like 50 kilometers of the way. Uh, I was running behind schedule anyway, and it was raining real bad that day, so I was drenched. And I was like, right, I'm just going to carry on. And that night, so similar visions from the Vipassana retreat. I was hallucinating a lot. I was walking through what can only be described as like abandoned farms with just animals wandering and scary woods and just these desolate areas in the pitch darkness, and all I could see was what my head torch was showing.
Wow.
And it was scary. It really
Mm.
was, and I was quite delusional. And I think that day I got to about 70. Well, that evening I got to about 70 kilometers, 80 kilometers, and I was just done. I was so done at like 5 in the morning, and I got on a park bench, and it was raining, and I basically passed out and I
Really?
slept. Yeah, which looking back was so dangerous. Like just this kid or adult, I guess, but just asleep, like very vulnerable in the middle of nowhere in a foreign country in the rain.
Yeah.
It's like, and I woke up like I think I woke up at like 7 a.m., slept for 2 hours, and
Yeah.
I just thought, what a silly situation to be in. Like, I'm just gonna ride a train. I'm gonna get a train for the remaining 20 kilometers that I've planned to my next accommodation.
Okay.
Because I quickly realised that if I was to do stuff like that, like walk through the night, it's just going to affect the longevity of the trip. Like, I'm just going to injure myself. I'm going to get myself ill.
Mm.
Um,
Did you
so
from a psychological level? Because on a previous podcast we talked about the fear of failure. Did you have this sort of like um, dual mind throughout the whole journey of like, if I take the train, am I failing? Have I, did those sort of thoughts come into your mind and keep you in conflict?
100%.
Mm.
And it is so ridiculous looking back.
Mm.
But I was documenting this on Instagram. So throughout my trip, I was doing stories and I was putting pictures up and stuff, and I was
Mm.
documenting that night actually. And I was just like, I'm letting people down.
Mm.
It's like it's so ridiculous to think about because I'm out here for myself. I'm not out here for anyone else really.
Mm.
That's so. If I believe that I should do this for my own health, do it. But yeah, like you say, it's just this plague of doubt in my mind, just like
Mm.
letting everyone down. I'm letting myself down.
Mm.
It's not Dango's running or whatever. But I quickly, after some sleep and some good food in a city, I I got past this kind of idea that I was letting everyone down, and I
Mm.
was back on the road with revitalized almost.
That's good. Yeah.
And then my journey in Germany began, and that was some of the best time I had there. It was so amazing. Um, I went through certain cities like Stuttgart and Munich, and met some great people in hostels, and people were eager to hear about what I was doing because it's quite an odd thing to do, I guess, and just trek, trek solo, and quite a bold. I was always told I was brave, and I never really thought that. I thought I'm just doing what I want to do. This is just what feels normal to me.
Mm.
And at that point, I'd been walking for like 20 days, and like each day doing somewhere between 30 and 50 kilometers or something. And and even that in itself felt normal. But what I often neglected was that's a feat in itself for a lot of people to even just travel like a marathon's distance in a day.
Mm.
And I was doing that back to back every day by myself, and it just became this this is a new normal. This is my everyday now. I wake up, I do this, I walk, I run, um, and that's how my life changed, I guess, 3 months, 3 months ago, I was sat in an office behind a computer, and then the next minute I'm just wandering through random parts of Europe.
Yeah. How do you deal with sort of like people? I was talking to someone else about this a couple of weeks ago, not on the podcast, but just in general. Like, how do you deal with people saying compliments like "you're brave" or "you're yeah," compliments like that when you get that along the way?
I'll take them. I'll readily take them.
Yeah.
I've been speaking to a friend about this, and he says that one of a great feature that I have is I'm willing to take a compliment, because
Mm.
he says that a lot of men don't.
Mm.
People don't like to be praised, and you know what? If you've done something good and you're doing something that is brave, yeah, own it, because
Mm.
that's fuel for the fire to carry on.
Yeah.
And throughout this trip, I was raising money for charity. So it's like I felt like I was doing something good. I was doing this to help raise awareness for a charity called Young Minds, which is about anxiety and depression in young people,
Mm.
because I felt that being in London doing that job certainly created more anxiety in my life. So I wanted to kind of flip it on its head almost, and do something completely different, but contribute to the people that maybe was in the same situation as me.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's amazing, and it's yeah. I think like you touched on just then with the maybe it being a male thing. I don't know, but I think compliments are a weird thing for some people to get their head around.
mm,
For a variety of reasons. Some people because they don't actually that maybe they have low self esteem, or maybe they think it's vain to accept a compliment. But yeah, I think, like you say, it in recognizing something you've done well. It If you don't do that, and if you don't let other people do that for you, um, then you're only ever criticizing yourself,
mm,
and always just trying to striving to improve, which is really important, and it's really good to have that striving. But I found with myself, I guess it's a sort of gratitude thing, and looking how far you've come, because um, if you don't look back and say, "Oh, I've actually done quite well to get where I am now," then you're just always struggling. You're always struggling to get further, 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 and you don't have that. Yeah, I guess that gratitude and that nice feeling of like, wow, I've done quite well. Um,
well, it's all feedback, right?
mm,
It's genuine feedback for what you're doing, and are you making good decisions? If people are happy with what you're doing and proud of you and everything, yeah, maybe you're making some good decisions and you're doing the right thing.
mm,
Similarly, if someone's giving you an insult,
yeah,
understand where the insult can come from, and
yeah,
is the sometimes there is people that will insult people for no reason,
yeah,
but often there is something in it, and
yeah,
there's some feedback to take from that,
yeah,
and think, okay, maybe I do need to change that about myself, or
yeah,
maybe I don't.
yeah.
But
Cool. Okay, so what were some of the other sort of I say highlights, but I don't mean that as in like the good times. I just mean, you sort of talked about that run through the night across the border from France to Germany. I, I would say that that's a highlight in the sense of it stands out. So what other thing? What?
yeah, it certainly was.
Yeah. So what other things stand out? So you're in Germany and you're having a better time largely because you can speak to people more and you're having more of that interaction.
Mm.
And then what? How far did you get with your journey? Like, because obviously Corona. So when did you leave? When did you go? When did you land in France?
September the 23rd, 2019.
Okay, so obviously coronavirus was creeping around the corner during your journey.
Little
So
did I know that,
yeah,
but
yeah.
uh, yeah. So I guess I'll talk about my route in general.
Hmm.
The route I was going from France to Istanbul. So what that took me through France, Germany, Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, and Bulgaria.
Right.
Um, So along the route, I will say that it is a general highlight, and I often say this when people question me in person about it. Like they always say, "Oh, where's the best place you went? Where's the best place you went?"
Mm.
And it always comes to Austria because
Right.
Austria was just so beautiful. It was it was a when you the area that I crossed into Austria from Germany, I'd had this great experience in Germany, meeting great people, and I'd done a lot of running in the countryside, and it reminded me a lot of the Yorkshire Dales, which made me feel at home.
Mm.
And the actual exact point where you cross into Austria, I had to climb a mountain,
Okay.
and it was quite surreal. Like you go the actual border itself along this path, you go under a waterfall of under this little bridge that's like a cavern, and it was just like wow, this
Yeah.
I couldn't have even imagined this up.
Yeah.
Like it's so cool because when I think of Austria, I do think of like the mountains, like
Mm.
it's so hilly and stuff. And and when I got there, it was like, okay, this is actually exactly how I imagined it, which a lot of the trip so far hadn't been.
Yeah.
Um, and then I get to the top of the mountain on the other side because Austria was a lot higher altitude than where I was in Germany, so I must have raised about 1,000 meters or something.
Mm.
Um, and I just felt like I was in this sacred land. I
Wow.
really did. It was like mountains surrounding me, each side. It was like through a valley, and I could see mountains covered in snow, despite it being like uh, glorious sunshine
Mm.
in this pristine area. And I was just like, wow, I am
Mm.
so lucky to be here right now. This is
Mm.
such an amazing place, and I did feel that connection to nature, and I felt that all the way through Austria. I was traveling through the valleys really, but then there was this one point that I realized, okay, I will have to cross the Alps at some point. Uh, and that day came, and it's quite a funny yet again silly story for myself. It was a glorious day, and I had to climb this mountain that was, I think, 2,700 meters high.
Right.
Um, so higher than anything I'd climbed before. Um, and I get to the foot of this mountain, and I talked to my auntie that day before, and I was like, I don't know if this is actually even safe. Like, if I don't know if this is actually what something that the public do. Like, I don't know if you're allowed to
Mm.
do it.
Mm.
So I was like, okay, when I get to the bottom, I'm going to consult some people and say, is it safe to go up? Do people do this? Um, and I get to the bottom, and there's this little village, and it's just a ghost village. There's not a single person there. Um, there's no one to ask. Well, there really isn't. There's a train that goes through the bottom of the mountain, so that's an option. But my naivety kicks in, and I just go, I'm just gonna do this, right? And I did, and I just climbed this mountain, and it was so intense. It was one of the probably the funnest days I had,
Mm.
hardest but funnest days because it was just a hike. It was a real vertical hike up this
Mm.
mountain, um, and I never done anything like it in my life, climbing something like the Alps. And I got to the top again in glorious sunshine, but I was walking in snow. It was so immense because it was cold up there. It was windy, but I remember looking up along when I was climbing it. Like I'd already climbed like the height of Ben Nevis, and I'm looking up and I'm just thinking, what? I've got this to climb as well. I swear
Wow.
I'm like an extra 1,000 meters. I'm like, how am I even going to do this? It doesn't actually look like you can.
Yeah.
And and one thing that was playing into my mind was like, if I do injure myself and I'm up here, I've got
Yeah.
no signal.
Yeah.
It's pretty damn
So
dangerous. But
was there a path or any sort of sign that it had been done before, or like?
so yeah, what was great was there was this little it was this little red, white, and red flag. It was this there was this little symbol painted on rocks, and you
Right.
just had to follow that. It was amazing.
Well, that's
It was
cool.
like, yeah, it was like a documented footpath, I guess. So I did know I was on some kind of documented path,
Okay.
which made it a little bit better that I wasn't just winging it, which I
Yeah.
kind of was. Um, but when I got to the top, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then sat there for a little bit, took my shoes off, and my feet were pretty mangled. But I was enjoying it while I can. But then I realised, while it's getting dark, and I've now got to get down the other
Mm,
side
yeah.
because there was no accommodation, and it was all about it was. I had to climb down the exact same height, and it was getting dark. So that night was fun. I was kind of sprinting down this mountain, racing the sun. But what was fun about it was that I was going. It must be a skiing resort, these mountains as well. So there was ski slopes, and I was running down the ski slopes because it was easier to go down them than just like the footpath. It was a bit more technical to look where my footing was.
Yeah.
So I could just run down these like already made slopes, and it was just yeah, it was fun. It was also scary as well because it was getting really dark,
Mm.
and uh and I was just getting down. But I got down there, got to my accommodation for the night, and I'll say that the accommodation in Austria was so nice. It was like log cabins, like with
Mm.
fires, and it was just very ornate. Ornate, that's not the word, like traditional. But and I got there, and these guys were just like, "Oh, where have you been?" And I'm like, I came from the. I've been up that mountain and come from the other side. He goes, "No, you haven't." And I went, "Yeah, I have." And they just couldn't believe me. Like the yeah, every time I explain myself, I'll say this: every time I explain myself, it was always two reactions. When they were like, "Oh, where are you going?" and I'd say Istanbul, and like obviously it sounds ridiculous. I'd get people they'd go, "Wow, that's amazing!" Like, what? Explain more. Or I'd get they'd nod their head and go, "Oh, wow, yeah, that's great," and like it was so obvious that they didn't understand what I was saying because because no one had just been like, "Oh, right, sound you just running 3,000 kilometers." Like, yep, cool. But yeah, I got that reaction a lot. Um, but
Wow.
yeah, that was a monumental milestone as well.
It sounds like that
Crossing.
was a lot more positive than the one where you went across the border into Germany. It
Oh
sounds,
yeah, it definitely was.
yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
because
it's that balance of finding like something that's very difficult, but also enjoyable at the same time. Not so difficult that you lose all motivation and it becomes really, really,
that's
yeah.
what flow is, right? That's exactly what flow is. It's about getting that right balance of being challenged, but not being too easy.
Mm,
But yeah, and you lose yourself.
mm.
And them moments, they were so good. They're the nostalgic moments that I look back on. But there was the days in between them, like the key moments. Some of it was me running for like 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers through mundane like fields. Like there was some pretty rubbish times. Like I'll
Mm.
say, so after I got through Austria, I then arrived in Slovenia. Slovenia was one of the hardest 3 day stints that I did because I was only crossing the north of Slovenia, so I wasn't spending a lot of time there. I wasn't going through any major cities or anything.
Mm.
I just basically had to just get through it, and it was raining the whole time I was there, and there was a lot of elevation to get through,
Mm.
and every day was a 60-kilometer day, so that was really tough. Just getting through it. The accommodation wasn't as readily available, I guess,
Mm.
and it was raining, so I couldn't enjoy the city, the places I was going through. So that was a real taxing 3 days going through Slovenia.
Yeah. Did you have any border stuff that you had to do? But I guess it's all EU countries so far.
Up until that point, no. Like, so Austria and Germany, it's free borders.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. France, same with France and Germany, and Slovenia. Oh, I can't remember the border.
Mm.
That's strange. I can't even remember crossing. Wow. Um, I will have documented it on my Instagram, so I'm sure it's there. But yeah, no, I don't remember that. I don't. There must not have been at that point. That changed actually when I went between Slovenia and no Croatia and Serbia. So that's where I started getting passport checks.
Mm.
But I'd just talk about kind of going through Slovenia and then into Croatia. Like, it was dull. Like, I was going through, well, I'll say, and Serbia, to be honest. I was just going through these mundane fields. It was extremely flat, and I was just trekking through these, like, what times it's like, what am I doing? Like, I was listening to podcasts and audiobooks to keep myself entertained, but it was
Mm.
like, it was really hard to get myself motivated to go each day, because there was nothing fun to see anymore. Like, I'd been through the valleys of the Austrian Alps, and like the green fields of the Black Forest of Germany, and then now I'm just going through like farmlands that are growing like corn. Like,
Mm.
it was pretty boring.
Mm.
Um, and I think I relied a lot on social media just to kind of talk to people, and that kind, like, I always used social media as a tool to kind of not vent, but, oh, I'm here. If anyone wants to talk to me, you can,
Mm.
and a lot of people did reach out. A lot of people were inspired, which was quite nice. Um, Whether that inspiration lasted in their life, I don't know. Whether it was just this kind of like fleeting thing.
Mm.
Um, I like to hope I encourage some people to run, but um, yeah, there was a lot of mundanity from after Slovenia, really, of going through these mundane places, and
Would
not to discredit the countries at all, but
they won't
that
be using this as a advertisement for tourists for sure.
tourism, yeah.
But which is interesting because our last episode we talked about boredom and people not wanting to run because they're bored. Like, and for you, you say running itself, you find it's the most fun thing. So yeah, what do you think happened there? Why do you think you started feeling bored? Like, I know you said because of the contrast with places like Austria, like the dramatic landscape and things like this. But
Mm.
do you think maybe your mental faculty of sort of trying to be more present or things like that, they were more exhausted, or like why do you think boredom was able to creep in as easily?
So yeah, I was exhausted,
Mm.
physically, emotionally, mentally. Um, when I was crossing into Croatia, I will have been about 45 days in, probably.
Mm. Yeah.
And at that point, I'd maybe had. So I will say I did have a few rest days. Up until that point, I'd probably had 4 rest days, 5 rest days.
Mm.
Um, but as you can imagine, the ta- it's physically taxing to be doing this kind of distance of 50 kilometers a day, um, day in and day out. So that was physically tasking. Obviously, my body was wearing down, but emotionally, I was I hadn't had since Germany. I hadn't had any real good conversations,
Mm.
and I was very lonely, and that was tough. I was I was battling this loneliness, really, just kind of how can I keep myself motivated? And that's when a lot of questioning started. Why am I here? What am I doing? Is
Mm.
this worth it? Could I be going home? And could I achieve this? Could I achieve what I've set out to do in any other way that I don't need, that isn't so draining on myself?
Mm.
But then I also contrasted this because I remember I was talking to our friend Carl before it, and I always said I don't want this to be a holiday. This is not going to be a holiday,
Mm.
because everyone would always say, "Oh wow, that sounds amazing. I'd love to do that." And I'm like, I don't think you. I don't think everyone would love to run 50 kilometers 40 days in a row. You know,
Yeah.
that what's fun in that? Like, obviously there is some fun in it, but it's like, no, it's quite a taxing thing by yourself. Like,
Mm.
it is a hard thing to do, and that. So I tell myself that, I'm like, when I'd get myself down, I'd be like, wait, no, you said this wasn't going to be fun,
Mm.
and it isn't fun. And in that, I'd have to think, is this the right kind of difficult that I set out? Is this the difficult that's going to improve me and and give me lessons, or is this just going to be the difficult that beats me down till I'm just a shell, you know?
Mm.
And I carried on. So I guess I told myself that it was worthwhile. For some reason it was worthwhile, and I carried on. Um,
Yeah, I sort of relate it to the Vipassana retreat stuff. It's like, the stimulus, you'd been had the amazing privilege of having all this stimulus with Germany and all the people you met, and then Austria with all the amazing scenery and the amazing accommodation, and now that sort of pleasure stimulus was gone. It feels more like the silent retreat, in that you've
yeah.
got this very mundane external thing to deal with, and now, yeah, you've got to keep yourself going. You've got to keep your mental state focused. And yeah, do you find that sort of that tie with the sort of Vipassana stuff? Did you feel that you were consciously trying to bring that into what you were doing at that stage, because it was so much harder to be happy or to enjoy what you were doing?
Yeah, I was constantly trying to leverage the learnings that I'd had from the retreat,
Mm.
and it wasn't working.
Mm.
You know, it's like, no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't shake this feeling like, what am I doing?
Mm.
What am I doing? What am I doing? Um, and that made it harder. That made it really harder.
Mm.
So, but it, but I carried on each day, and
Mm.
I think, and looking back, it's hard to say whether I should have, but I just did it. Like, it was that kind of doubt again. Like, I've told people I'm doing this, I'm just gonna do it, and I did it, and I'd get up each day and I'd run, and I'd just beat myself down over and over and over again, with
Mm.
no real light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I didn't know what I was to look forward to at that point,
Mm.
um, until I knew I was going to India. So that was something to aim for, um, and there was a few nice little moments, like in Serbia. So one thing I didn't anticipate along the trip was how long I'd spend in Serbia, because when I'm planning this, I'm thinking like France, Germany, Austria. Yeah, I've got for all these countries, and I never really even thought about Serbia. But Serbia was the longest stint that I
Right.
had, and I didn't know much about the country. It was certainly interesting, and the people were so friendly. But like there was like odd times where I'd go through there, and I'd stay in a house, and we again very very broken English. We were trying to talk to each other, and this guy like brings out his home brewed raki, which is a spirit, and we're doing shots of it. Like I'm like, this is not what I want to be doing. I've just travelled 60 kilometres to get here. I want to go to sleep, and yeah, I'm just drinking shots of spirits. There was a lot of odd experiences like that. Funny ones, like they'll always be the nostalgic and the fond in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was just getting through it, and I eventually got to the end of Serbia after I think 30 days there or something, and arrived in Bulgaria, and I crossed the border. One thing that's funny about the border crossings at that point when I actually had to get my passport signed, stamped, I there's all the cars going through and everything like normal border crossings. Not many people go through on foot. I'd probably say not hardly anyone. So like when I'd walk through, I'd there is no footpath or anything, so I'm having to just walk it between cars like in the queue and stuff. And it's like I'd tell them what I'm doing, and they're like looking at me like, "No, you're not. You're just not. You're not doing this thing." Like, and in Serbia, the law is that you need to be documented every day where you are if you're a tourist.
Okay.
So like I'm trying to explain, like I've I haven't been in any one place. I've been multiple places every night.
Yeah.
And yeah, I got a few funny looks, but there was never any real issues. A few like maybe I had to stay there for a bit longer than most people, but yeah, I did get through. But
Nice.
that getting to Bulgaria, Sofia, which is the capital of Bulgaria, is right near the border. So after one day of traveling through Bulgaria, I get to Sofia, and because I'd just been beating myself down, I was so burnt out. I told myself, okay, I'm going to have a real rest here, a real time to reflect and see what's going on. And I was in this hostel, and after a few days of staying there, I did some running, like more fast-paced running, like trying to get like a fast 5K or whatever, and that felt really good. Like just running, not for the sake of it, not just doing this because I've told myself I'll do it each day, but I'm doing what I enjoy again. And it always comes down to like, am I getting enjoyment of the thing that I'm doing? And again, I was, and I had this really. I met this girl in one of the hostels that I was staying in, and we spent a day together, and I remember her saying to me that like I was explaining my trip to her and everything, and she was like, "Wow, what you're doing is amazing. Like you you don't feel the need to carry on. Like don't let it beat you down." And I knew that theoretically in my own head. I'd heard it so many times from my family members that, oh, you can always come home if you need to. Don't worry about it. You're not letting anyone down. And I'd tell this to myself again and again, but I never believed it. There was not an inch in believing that. But then hearing it from someone in person, bearing in mind I hadn't had any real good conversations for a long time, sitting down with this person, she lit something inside of me just made me decide, actually, you know what? Yeah, I can. It feels right. And I decided, okay, I'm not going to make it all the way to Istanbul on foot. That is, I'm gonna stop running from here.
Right.
And I stayed in Sofia for a week, 2 weeks, and then eventually rode a coach to Istanbul because I still had my flight to India. So I knew I'd still be going to India, and I stayed in Istanbul for 3 weeks there, and I just kind of lived there.
Was that
It
more of
was
a holiday
nice.
when you were there?
A holiday. I was certainly doing touristy things, but I'd say it was more like I lived there
Okay.
because I wasn't. It's not like I was rushing out to uh, to do the touristy things, tick the boxes and stuff. I was literally just like living what a life would be like back home. I was just trying to get back some of that normality in my life, and I signed up to like a running club, and I went running with these groups of, they're called run crews in Istanbul, and they were amazing. They It was organized groups of like 200 people running with speakers through the streets, like along the beachfront, and it was just immense. Like such, you know what? It just developed the sense of community that had been lacking in up until that point. Like
Do you think
it
you
was
value
all
that a lot more now since doing those
certainly,
experiences? Yeah.
certainly, it's all about community for me, and it's all about having good conversation with people, being actually willing, not willing, able to express yourself. Because it's all well and good trying to express yourself through Instagram or talk to yourself, but you need to get stuff off your chest to people, I feel. Um,
So we haven't actually got much time left.
okay.
So I don't know how you wanted to do it. How much more of your trip is there to talk about? Do you think it'd be something we could bring up again in another episode, or is there sort of a way?
There isn't an awful lot. Um, from there was one funny incident in Istanbul where I was running one morning, and I was only going to do like a short run, and I bumped into these people, and it turns out there was like quite an intense running group, and I just said to them, "Oh, can I join you?" And they were like, "Yeah." And they were running a half marathon that day at a very fast pace. So I went from not wanting to train that much, and I did the whole thing with them, and it was just such a good atmosphere. But
Nice.
the the continuation into India. So I flew from, while I decided that I wasn't going to do this running trip anymore, I still said, right, I'm going to go to India. And I didn't know whether that was the right decision to make or not. I really didn't. I pondered on this a lot. My dad and brother actually met me in Istanbul just for a couple of days to see me
Oh, okay.
because they thought that if they don't see me in Istanbul, they're definitely not going to see me for if I'm in India. Like it's a lot further for them to travel, and they don't even know where I'm going to be in 3 to 4, even more months in the future. So,
So
and
when was that? When were you in Istanbul? When did they visit?
they visited on the 21st of December, and I flew to India on the 20 that day.
Oh,
No,
okay.
yeah. So I flew the same day they flew back. So I spent 2 days with them. And I remember talking to them a lot about, I don't know if it's right. I don't know
Why?
if it's actually because I'd beaten myself down so much, and I'd realised how much I valued community.
Right.
And at that point I realised I could get this community back home. This sense of community is available back home, and I know it is, and I know that I could harness it a lot better than I did when I was in London. So I was very, very on the fence about whether I should go to India or not. but but then it hit me. I'm never gonna be in a position where I can do this like again so readily. I've already got a flight booked there. I've always wanted to see more of the Eastern world. Let's just do it.
Mm.
And I did that. And I didn't know, and I said to myself, I didn't know how long I was going to be there. I kind of knew it wasn't going to be this full year like I anticipated. But I spent a month there, and towards the end of that month, it didn't feel like I was going to these beautiful temples and all sorts. Like I was sometimes in the feet of the Himalayas and doing all this beautiful stuff, but it wasn't striking anything inside of me.
Right.
And that's when I knew, like, okay, now it's time to go home
Right.
because
Was
you're in
coronavirus
such
on
a.
the horizon as well? Was that sort of in your consciousness around that time,
I
or
mean,
not really?
technically it would have been around, but I didn't know. No, it
Yeah.
was it was late January. I came home, but I I mean it's lucky that I did, I guess. Um, but yeah, I just wasn't feeling anything. Like I wasn't feeling this sense of wonder, which I definitely should when I'm on the
Mm.
Ganges, like it just beautiful scenery and all these statues and temples and yeah, it wasn't striking anything. And I did meet some great people in India. There was a good sense of community there actually, I will
Mm.
say. I did a fair bit of yoga and I returned a lot more to my meditation practices. I did intend to go and live in an ashram for a bit, but I never actually did that.
Mm.
Um, but that while I was on the trip, I kept telling myself, I'm not learning anything. I'm not learning any of these lessons that I set out to do. And it felt like a waste, I guess. I was like, right, I've set out to do this thing and I'm not learning anything. I'm just beating myself down. But upon returning, I had some of the greatest conversations I've had with people in my life. I sat down and really talked to people and reflected about what I've been doing, what I've been through, and it kind of unlocked this chest of lessons that have just been accumulating all the way through the trip. I learned so much about myself, what I'm capable of, what I value in my life, and that was all unlocked after, and that's I was never gonna. I say it again, like the grass is always greener on the other side. It was rubbish at the time while I was trekking through Croatia and Serbia and stuff, but like they gave me the lessons that I can reap now,
Mm.
and I look back with them rose tinted glasses, like I I've learned so much from that experience, and it's so valuable to me. But at the time, I just felt, why am I here? What am I doing?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of what you're talking about. It's an ongoing discussion and a lot of just generally this sort of thing of achieving this, going for a goal, trying to achieve this. Like, I guess in your case, it was like I'm going to run from this point to this point, and that is it. And having that as a goal and that feeling of achievement, and but also having these other things pulling you away, and I guess more of a balance to life. I sort of cite like Whiplash. Have you seen the film Whiplash?
I have amazing film.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to interpret the ending. Well, I thought anyway. I was becoming more aware of be it having a balance in life, and there is I don't fall really hard on either side of the sort of discussion. Really, I believe it's great having these people that are these pioneers, that are these people that devote their life so focused to one area and they achieve these great things. But at the same time, I think the less quantifiable thing, but maybe the more important thing to me, is having this balance of other areas of your life. And the end of Whiplash, I don't want to give it away. So spoiler alert, anyone who hasn't seen the film, but definitely watch it. The ending for me, I was watching it with a friend. It was just the two of us, and he saw it as like trying to say what you can achieve when you try really hard. And for me, I didn't see it like that. The the ending I saw as was a guy lost in trying to achieve this goal that he's losing these other things. And there's like his dad who's devoted his life to teaching and has never earned very much. And there's always this discussion throughout the film of the dad who seems to not be a success, who seems to just be this guy who hasn't done very much in his life, whereas the son, he wants to become this amazing drummer. He aspires to be these musicians who are absolutely the best in their field, and that the dad watches him as he gives his final sort of performance in it. And for me, I saw it as like a tragedy, whereas my friend saw it as like an amazing achievement, and he's finally done it. He's finally at the point where he can be the best. But I saw it as a tragedy of
That's
this.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a tragedy of this guy who's now, he hasn't been able to see what his dad was trying to tell him of. It's not just all about that. You know, you need to have love. You need to have a sense of family. You need to give to people. And help others, and all these other areas of life. So yeah, I think that just sort of comes to mind, and that's been playing on my mind a lot over the last few years. And it's really interesting. The reason that you wanted to come back home was the reason that I wanted to come back home last year. So I was traveling for 2 years with my partner, and I'd done various bits of traveling before. I'd been away on a working holiday in Australia before I went to uni, and I travelled around a bit of Southeast Asia and stuff at that time. I've been away, met my partner on a 3-month volunteer program in Nepal, and so I've been away. But this time, what you were talking about with seeing these amazing views and it just not resonating, it for me, I was like, I wanna. The community part is so important to me, and I think subconsciously I went away because I wanted to find the ideal community abroad. Um, and I realized, well, what am I doing? There is no ideal community. I've got friends and family back home. I'm very lucky that they're all in sort of a similar area. Some are scattered, but I've got a base back home, and I haven't been grateful for that. I haven't been valuing that. So that was a difficult thing, I guess, in some ways, because I was with my partner and we were out there together. And she was great because she was like, let's just enjoy our time here, like make the most of it. And she was that real nice balancing thing of me, like, right, I'm here now, I'm gonna be here until whenever. And it was the second year when it started to affect me more. The first year I was sort of just enjoying it and stuff, but and then over time I just tried to enjoy while I was there, but I knew that I wanted to get back, and I didn't really have the sort of post trip blues that a lot of people have when they come back from traveling. Because I did a little bit, but it was more like TVing things, or it was more like just settling back in and coming back to friends and trying to regain that sort of rapport with them, and just that sort of just the awkwardness of that and the difficulty of just trying to fit back in when you haven't been a part of people's life really for that long, for a long time. But I didn't have the sort of like, oh, I wish I was out there, I wish I was back, and I felt it was time to come back. So yeah, I can definitely relate to what you're saying, and it is really difficult. It's a very difficult thing because yeah, just this discussion with, should I be achieving this? Should I be going for these sort of goals? Should I be, reaching for the stars? New Zealand, for example, where we spent most of the 2 years. I would say it's probably the right country for me and my partner. Like in so many ways, social factors and the way it's run politically and everything else. It was the best country I've been to, and it's the country that I feel I would thrive most in, and it most suits me. But I'd then be giving up all these other things. So, yeah, I think it's unfortunate we sort of, we'll have to sort of wrap it up now. But yeah, I definitely relate to what you're saying. It's a very difficult thing to get in your mind, and it's very personal, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like we had a very similar experience because I I went out on this trip thinking, like, well, once I'd left my job in London, I had this naive thought that why is England? Why do I have to live in England? Like the world's so vast. There's all these places to explore. I don't need to stay here. And there I go and I travel. And then it's like it sounds cheesy, but it's like home was exactly where I left it. Like
Mm,
it, all the relationships were there, all the friends were there, all the activities, everything I wanted was already there. It's just I wasn't interacting with it. I wasn't. I didn't have the right mindset at the time
mm,
to unlock all of that great abundance in my life. And I guess going out on this trip gave me the tools to then do that when I returned.
mm.
And I'm still trying to apply that to my life now.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's that thing of like, well, I guess the song um, "Simple Math" by Manchester Orchestra. Have you heard that? But there's a lyric in it that's like, "What have I been trying to get where I've always been?" And yeah, there's lots of like work of arts that sort of discuss that. The Alchemist is one of them, of sort of seeking somewhere you've always been, and yeah, um, cool. Well, yeah, we'll sort of have to wrap it up there. I'll just say again to anyone listening, if this resonates with you and you'd like to share it with someone who you think it would resonate as well and like to continue the conversation what we've been having, have any thoughts, and please share it on. We'd like these sort of conversations to be happening wider, and yeah, be lovely to get more opinions on the show and a wider diversity of people on the show. So yeah, I'll just finish by saying thank you very much, Dan.
Cheers, Dan. It's been great.
Yeah, and yeah, maybe we'll get you back on as well. It seems like there's a lot of stuff that we can chat about in the future. Seems we've got a lot of similar subjects that we want to explore.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. Well, take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.